Right, welcome back to the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 61. And we're just going to jump in thick and fast like last week. Not because we don't have a lot of time. It's more so there is so much to talk about because UFC 304 was on Saturday night and I can see you shaking your head. And I'm assuming that is due to the result of the main event, which didn't go the way not only that you expected, but wanted it either. And I share the same sentiment. What were your thoughts?
It wasn't why I was shaking my head. I was shaking my head because I was thinking it has literally been the most intense, crazy, random week in the MMA world, contextually, for me, ever.
I'm sure.
So let's start with the fights, and then I'll fill you in with the gossip, because best
That's
believe
what I was going to ask.
I've got a lot of it.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of gossip.
I'm excited.
A lot of tea. A lot of tea. And
I feel like I'm back in school.
yeah, so do I, to be honest. And it's never usually my MO, but I've just got so many fun little things, and why not? Let's have some fun. So, yeah, the main event, to be honest, I didn't think it was going to go like that, but I didn't count that out either. So I wasn't massively surprised. I think I said to you a lot of times in the build-up that this fight is giving me bad vibes from the outset.
You said it the other week. I had that replaying what you said on the episode last week. You said, I just feel like it might be his moment. There's that creeping bit of doubt coming in. And honestly, I've been replaying that, exactly what you said in my head over the last week. And by the time it came to fight night, I got a bit scared of that too. And lo and behold, look what happened. Quickly, I'll just jump in and tell you that because of that loss, he stopped me from being 200 pounds richer. So thank you, Bilal Muhammad, for absolutely destroying my parlay. I'm never betting again.
I have a good sense of when there's a moment for a fighter. I have a very good sense of when there's a moment. Sean O'Malley, sure. Juliana Pena was another one where I sensed that, which is a weird one to bring up because I actually bumped into her quite often in the fighter hotel, in the gym, bumped into her a few times, had a little conversation with her. And
as you do. Just another day.
I don't know if this is public knowledge, so I don't really know if I should be saying it. But
come on, world exclusive.
Yeah, if anyone's listening to this, let's tap in. And you're welcome. So I actually mentioned to her the other day because she was out in New York, and I said to her, "Oh, you went over there for a dentist trip?" Because I saw her interview on Ariel Helwani. I can't remember quite how it was brought up, but she said, I only just said that to him because he's so nosy. I didn't actually go there for a dentist trip. I was actually going there to do some physical assessments because I've got my fight on October the 5th. I don't know if that's public knowledge, to be perfectly honest. And I'm not even going to clip this and share it out. So anyone that's listening is listening and will get that. So I believe Juliana Pena is fighting October the 5th. I think that was the date that she said. But I didn't even know we were going to go there. Let me rewind that back. So just got a good pulse on when it's fighters' times. And I really felt like that was going to be the case for Bilal Muhammad. And if you want to actually get into the X's and O's of the fight, I won't dive into all of the small details, but the thing that really stood out for me was there was some incredibly low IQ moves in that fight for Leon Edwards.
Agreed.
And that's not what you typically associate with him. There were times where he'd be in long grappling exchanges. It'd be towards the end of the round. He would have 30, 50 seconds left. It'd be a stalemate up to that point. And then he'd finally get separation and then re-engage with the grappling with little to no damage.
Does that a lot. He's done that in all of his last few fights. Shot a takedown on a wrestler. I don't understand it. It never goes well.
I understand it. Why he would shoot a takedown on a wrestler. I get it. Number one, it's an ego thing. Number two, it's something to say, I can do that too. Number three, he backs his jiu-jitsu to take the back and look for a submission. I get it. But it's the fact of where it was in the fights and where it was in the rounds which confused me. It was very, very clear watching it in live person. I'm not sure how it looked on the broadcast because they always look like different fights.
That's right. You were watching it, weren't you? Got about that.
I was
you were there
in the arena. So
yeah,
it was very, very clear that he was just constantly getting backed up to the cage, and he just needed to get out of that, needed to escape, needed to take the center, needed to assert some dominance. But the fact that Belal was just occupying his high guard, and then shooting the double leg, it's one thing picking it up and saying, okay, you need to address that, but it was happening so many times, and it just didn't look like he was making the adjustments to know that, okay, we need to work on having some down blocks. Okay, maybe we need to circle out with more emergency. And it was just time after time.
Yeah.
He'd bring the guard high, he would, with some taps, with some jabs, with some shots to the body, and then boom, level change onto it. And I was very, very shocked that he didn't make those adjustments quicker. But shout out to Belal, because he was like a dog with a bone. Everyone knew his game plan going into this. He was very clear about it, and he executed it with perfection. A lot of layers to his takedown, a lot of smart pressure, small micro movements, just edging into range, staying very safe, staying very balanced, getting his takedowns and doing what he needed to do. Was it the most exciting? Of course it wasn't going to be. Was it impressive? For certain, and it was well deserved. That was my take on the main event, which really sucked the life out of the arena, let me tell you that.
I'm sure. At 6 a.m. as well. I don't blame you. I do not blame you at all. Yeah, it was baffling because Edwards, what I noticed, was using that X guard to avoid that left hook when he was circling out, which is like I wouldn't say popular, but it was popularized in boxing with like Joe Frazier and George Foreman in the later sort of stages of his career. And it works a lot better in boxing. But in MMA, because you've got the guard so high, you're vulnerable not only to the body, which is the one weakness to it, but also for the threat of the takedown. So it was just baffling to me how he kept throwing up that high guard in, watching out for the left hook, which just opened up the double leg so much easier for Belal. And lo and behold, he had loads of success with that as a result. And the main takeaway for me that was so frustrating was I feel that Leon honestly could have finished that fight if he really wanted to. If he took the front foot, took the center of the octagon and just struck with him and put on the forward pressure, he would have probably put him away. We saw some really good exchanges in the middle there, especially at the start of the fifth round, where he tried to sort of pull his socks up and go for it. And then sort of faded back onto sitting on the back foot and allowing Belal to take control again. It was quite baffling. And then again, showing the urgency right at the end of the fight with those elbows. That fight goes another minute. We could have seen a stoppage. Belal was gushing from just a couple of those elbows. And one of them really stunned him where he froze up for a minute on his back. And I thought for a minute, surely not. We're not going to get another headshot dead moment, if you will. But it didn't happen. And that, at the end of the day, is Leon's fault. And I know there was obviously a lot of conversation about the time zone difference, which I actually think is a valid point, because I saw not just him talking about it, but Arnold Allen mentioned it as well. Even Tom Aspinall said he was 22 hours awake before the fight, which I thought was absolutely mental. And it's definitely not... I say it's definitely a contributing factor towards the performances that night, and maybe the lack of finishes, which made it even more frustrating that Dana White was criticizing the fighters after in the post-fight press conference, which was just...
That wound me up a bit, to
ridiculous.
Be honest.
So
I get it, and I understand why he was annoyed. I understand that, but take some responsibility. Take some accountability. Absolutely. I know it makes sense to go out there and say, well, it's one night, there's 100K, it shouldn't matter. Okay, that all sounds nice, it's a good soundbite, but let's actually be a little bit more practical. And what I will say is, being around the fighters all week, being in the training rooms, being in the gyms and the saunas at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. with these guys, and just seeing how they all adjusted, feeling it first person, you see how much impact it had. It was incredibly impactful to every fighter on that card, early or late. I spoke to Mick Parkin a few times, and he was on right at the start on at 11:30 and got a fantastic finish. But even he was having to slightly adjust, and every fighter on there had to adjust, and it 100%. Just having a very visceral look into that fight week, and obviously talking to a lot of people on that card, it most certainly had an effect. But talking about having an effect, let's just skip straight into the co-main. Are we both going to sit here and say, I told you so, respectively to each other?
This is the first thing I wanted to say. I have to give myself a special pat on the back, because I don't know if you remember, I did say he'd do it inside a minute, and he did it bang on the 1 minute mark, with the 1-2 down the pipe, with the follow-up ground strikes, as we both predicted, to an absolute T. So No surprises there. I mean, I think we all knew how good Tom Aspinall was, and we've been saying it for far too long. And it seems now, finally, people are actually warming to the idea that he's going to beat John Jones should they fight. Now, whether they will is another question that we've debated many a times. I think the answer is probably no. But at least that matchup is, if John Jones doesn't retire, that is the fight, and it would happen. But I'm not going to get my hopes up. I think you won't either, I imagine.
The man that was sitting next to me towards the end of it, he turned to me before the fight happened, the Tom Aspinall fight, and he said, "How does this go, mate?" And I told him exactly how I thought this was going to go. And I didn't even get into the details at that point. I just told him, it's going to be the first round. It's going to be a knockout TKO in the first. He turned to me after it, almost a little bit shocked, and kept saying to me, "You did call that, mate. Wow, you called that." And I was thinking,
it's not rocket science, is it?
That was the easiest prediction I've ever made. And there's been a reason why we've been saying this is happening, because it was highly predictable. Now, the fight with John Jones is not only fascinating from the side of that's the ultimate test for Tom Aspinall to see how great he truly is, but it's also from a perspective of Tom isn't without his own deficiencies. It's not as if he has zero weaknesses. He's acknowledged them before. If you watch tape study on some of his tendencies, it's clear that he has them. Now, offensively and as a general package, he's so incredible that he's able to go out there and absolute nuke people before they even get a chance to lay their hands on him properly for an extended period of time. That's why I want to see this John Jones fight, to be honest. I want to see Tom tested by the very, very best. I want to see him face someone that potentially can expose these weaknesses. I want to see him face someone that can break down the tape and look to pick him apart there. Of course I want Tom to win. Of course I want him to go on to be the very best. But because I think that of him, I think the most respectful thing for him is to face someone that could push him to that level. Because clearly up until this point, no one can. Everyone talks about taking Tom Aspinall to the deep waters. Everyone says the same thing. We're going to drag Tom to the deep waters. That's where we're going to find our success. No one's been able to do it. And not just deep waters, the flipping shallow end. They've barely got their armbands on and the shorts on before they get into the flipping swimming pool. It's 1 minute into the fight and he's nuking everyone. That was a sloppy performance. Not by my assessment, by his assessment as well. But guess what? He lands half a flipping jab. Next thing we know, he's got a belt wrapped around his waist. The ceiling is uncapped, and that's why we need the John Jones fight. Not because we're just trying to put him on a podium. Go on.
Sorry, I just had to go. I don't even think that Jones would push him to that level. Call me crazy. The only reason I say this is because the one weakness Tom Aspinall has is that he does leave his chin out. And that is there for him to be caught. As fast as he is, and as good as he is at getting in and out of danger, the chin is there. It is there for a counter shot. But a man like John Jones doesn't have the power to knock him out. Jones has had, if I'm not mistaken, 1 knockout in 11 years. And to be honest with you, it doesn't look like he's going to has that much power at heavyweight either. And definitely not enough to knock out Tom Aspinall. I'm going to be honest with you. So in my opinion, I think Curtis Blades was a harder fight than John Jones would be in terms of stylistically what one can do to one another. So I think Tom Aspinall will have a much, easier time and less chance of getting knocked out. I don't think that's even a crazy take. Yes, John Jones has the fight IQ and the technical ability, unrivaled. I will never deny that. But he doesn't have the knockout power, and he never has. And you kind of need that at heavyweight, to be honest with you. If anything, it matters most at heavyweight. And if you don't have that, against a guy like Tom Aspinall, I just don't think it's going to work out. And I think generally the fan sentiment is finally on the side of Aspinall as well, as I said earlier.
I agree with you. And every time I've spoke about that fight, I've said the same thing. However, my point is, what's the alternative? What's the alternative? There is no alternative. So if anyone's going to do it at this point, it's going to be John Jones. And I'm not trying to lay into Curtis Blades here whatsoever, because he is phenomenally talented and he does beat a lot of guys at heavyweight and he's been doing it for a very long time. But if I'm going to be super critical of him, I genuinely think there's a reason why he hasn't touched that gold. Not because he doesn't necessarily have the skill set, but when you go back and watch his fights, he does have success, but he doesn't do a great job at sticking to the game plan. You'll see him get ahead of himself in his fights. He'll have success and then get a bit greedy. And then guess what? I was looking through the post-fight press conferences, and that's exactly what he said himself. And it kind of reconfirmed what I already believed. He said, I got greedy because I touched him a few times, and then the game plan went out the window. That's kind of why I feel like he's been so close and never quite got there. To be the very, very elite, of course you have to have all the skills, but you have to be able to put a game plan together. And I think that fight was exactly how we thought it was going to play out. John Jones, of course, is the natural progression. And talking about progression, there's only one man that we can speak of when we say that word, and it's Paddy Pimblett. Tell me what you think, and then I'm going to get in a whole I told you so parade once again.
Yeah, I mean, I think we did very well on predictions for this event. And I think we both expected the Paddy. I mean, I think we both said submission, if I'm not mistaken. I thought he'd find the rear naked choke, but it ended up being a triangle armbar combination. And the moment that first bell sounded and we saw a very patient and composed Paddy, just from his stance and his manner, I immediately knew he was going to win the fight. It just looked like a completely different fighter. Compare him to his UFC debut against Luigi Vendramini. Erratic, crazy all over the place. And he nearly paid the price in that fight. Fortunately, his chin bailed him out. But compare him to now, it's night and day. Truly, it is. And that calm demeanor really, really just showed what was about to come. And it was a result of capitalization on very poor fight IQ from King Green, should I say. But,
no, you should not say.
Should I not say? Should we just go with Bobby? Oh, yeah, you're probably right. It's ridiculous.
Come on.
Bobby Green.
Love Bobby Green, but come on.
Yeah, Bobby King Green. Let's go with that. And he shot the takedown, and Paddy capitalized. And that bit of grappling was absolutely masterful. It's something you just only see at the higher level. Transitioning from really going from a scramble off the takedown, jumping the guillotine, and folding over the leg for the triangle because you've already got it over. It's just a combination of flow and two submission attempts put together that you only really see at the top level, especially on the big stage. It's even rarer. So very, very impressive. As well, Bobby held in there as well for a little while. What he didn't make it easy for him to finish that sub, even though the triangle looked dead and locked basically from the get. And yeah, it was masterful, truly masterful. I didn't think it would happen that early. Honestly, I thought we'd see Paddy maybe grind him down. I always wish we did see it go a little bit longer, because I'd like to see the evolution of Paddy's game more than we did, because I think he has evolved a lot. And you can probably attest to this, seeing him train in person, seeing the improvements he's made. But, I was so impressed, very, very much impressed. And I think Moicano is a good fight, and I think it's one he wins. To be honest with you, if that fight gets made, which it looks like it does, I think Paddy wins that fight pretty soundly.
I've been saying for the longest time when it comes to Paddy Pimblett, I say to everyone, okay, he's not without his weaknesses, isn't everyone? We've just been speaking about how Tom Aspinall has his, and he doesn't even have a combined fight time of 4 minutes in the last 20 years or whatever it is, some ridiculous statistic. So what I expected from Paddy was a first round submission. But where I'll have to hold my hands up and say that I didn't expect was what you said. I didn't expect to see him be quite as patient, because even in the Tony Ferguson fight, we didn't really see that. We saw it more so than previous fights, but not to the level where, like you said, very calm, very relaxed, very well balanced, very dialed in. Didn't expect that as much. I thought the submission would come from him extending his combinations, throwing out multiple attacks for Bobby to deal with, and then getting his hands on him. I did not foresee Bobby Green taking a shot. If I would have predicted that to happen, then I would have looked at the guillotines. I didn't see that happening. But what I did is, as soon as it hit the mat, I literally said, as soon as it hits the mat, it's game over. Paddy Pimblett's jiu-jitsu is lights out. People don't realize this. It's lights out. He's had, in his UFC career, he has won via submission every time he's attempted a submission in a fight. I think he's had 9 attempts in 4 fights, and he's submitted every single one of those opponents. And being in that room, watching him operate in King of the Mats in his training sessions and just looking at the athleticism, the power, the imagination, the creativity on the ground. If you are not born and bred in that world, it's going to be very, very difficult, and Paddy will swarm you there. And something that is very important as well is the cardio. Some people are good grapplers, but they can't sustain that pace. He most certainly can, because that's exactly where he feels at home. So it was always going to be tricky for Bobby Green there. And I think you look at the fights moving forward, Renato Moicano, I think, yeah, that looks fun on the ground. I think Paddy can also submit him. I think he knocks Moicano out. I think it stays standing. And quite honestly, I think he knocks him out. I don't think Moicano's a bad striker. I think stylistically it's interesting because, of course, he's a jiu-jitsu guy. I think when I look at that matchup, Paddy's just got too much athleticism, too much strength, too much speed to just overpower Moicano. Yes, he's skilled, but he's not very fast twitch. It's never really been his MO. And I think if Paddy lands on him, I think he can knock him out, quite honestly. And I think if it does go to the mat, I think the scrambles will be exciting. But I think Moicano is very used to grappling or fighting people with more traditional jiu-jitsu backgrounds. Paddy's very funky, doesn't do things how everyone else does them, and that's what makes him very difficult. And I think this weekend was probably the first time where people actually stopped and realised and saw he's flipping athletic. He's in shape. The shape that he came in that cage was ridiculous. And of course, it stands out even more because the obvious narrative around Paddy is always how big he gets outside of camp. But a little side story to this, obviously we'll get your thoughts on it. A little side story to this is I saw him quite a lot around the week, of course, because I know his manager fairly well. I actually didn't realise this, but I went to uni with his manager. So we were on the same course. We know the same people. He lived with one of my friends and he lived a couple of minutes away from him. We just never saw each other because we both never went to uni. So I actually know his manager very well. And of course, I know Molly very well as well. So just by default, I kept bumping into him a lot. And I'll tell you a little funny story. I'm sitting there chatting to Tommy, his manager, and Molly, and we're just having a little chat. It was the night before the fight, and I'm sitting on the sofa in the lobby, and we've been speaking for about 5-10 minutes. He comes out from the lift. He's got crunchy nut, some Nutella, and some bananas, and he comes to sit down. He's like walking towards me. I was like, "Oh, do you want to sit here, mate?" And he looks at me and goes, "Well, it was my seat." And I started laughing. And as I've got up, he's gone, "And that is my coat you're sitting on." And I look down and I'm flipping absolutely crushed. I think it was like a little Prada puffer jacket. I've absolutely crushed his jacket, sat in his seat, and I stood up and I was just like, this is terrible.
And you can't, what can you do? Because he would beat the shit out of you. You can't do anything.
Well, I'm not going to start getting lit.
No, I know. I'm playing devil's advocate, but it's just quite funny. Anytime people try and get in altercations with fighters, there's literally nothing you can do.
Well, all that I could do was address the hilarious elephant in the room. That was what I just done. So I just said to him, "Mate, this has gone terribly. Not only have I stole your seat, sat on your designer jacket, and stopped you from having one of the most elite snacks in the game, crunchy nut." I was like, "That's absolutely terrible. I'm sorry, mate." He just laughed. He was like, "No, you're all good, lad." But I said to him, I was like, "Look, I'll make it up to you." Because I said, "What milk have you got?" He said, "Oh, this is green." And then him and his team were getting into a little bit of a debate. They all were milk haters, which a lot of people are, which I find
disgraceful.
Weird.
Grow up.
Agreed. And then he was saying, "Oh, I often go for the blue top." I said, "Paddy, let me put you onto a little something here. Gold top milk. Gold top milk." He had no idea what this was. He started laughing at me.
I'm not hearing about it either. I have no idea. Gold top milk.
Straight from the tea. It's straight from the tea. It's essentially cream, but it's Jersey milk and it's gold top and it is the most elite of the elite. So I may have created a monster out of Paddy, putting him onto gold top milk because it is...
Get fatter now.
It is phenomenally delicious, but also incredibly caloric. So I reminded him of that a couple of times. But But yeah, that was a little funny side story for you, just absolutely ruining his coat and his pre-fight snacks. But where were we anyway? Where do you want to go from the card here?
Well, the one thing I really wanted to ask you about, I mean, actually, I'll tell you what, let's just run through a couple more fights quickly. Just the ones that I thought were quite good. I thought Arnold Allen had a very impressive performance against Giga Chikadze. I think they game planned that perfectly. They knew that Giga's cardio would not last, and they relied on Arnold's ability to put the pace on and take over the later rounds, and that's exactly what he did. I thought it was a very impressive performance. I thought it was a pretty clear decision win too. Close fight, but very clear. I thought it was impressive. I was a bit disheartened to see Molly McCann, of course, lose. You mentioned her just a minute ago. I thought Bruna Brazil, credit to her and the team, the Fighting Nerds, Kaya Barao, building an absolute army there. All of them are looking excellent, and that's clearly, the evolution of her game massively. She's improved hugely, and you saw how big of an underdog she was going into that fight. She definitely didn't look like one in the cage. So very impressive performance, but also credit to Molly for having the heart to stay in there, because those body shots were absolutely grueling. And there was a couple of times she very nearly finished the fight late on at the end of the second and third round. So she was definitely in that fight still, and it's very competitive, and one I actually quite enjoyed a lot. As of course we mentioned earlier, Mick Parkin as well with a knockout, exactly what I wanted to see. That was my one complaint with Mick Parkin, is he felt maybe a little bit too tentative inside the cage. Because he's a heavyweight, he's a big dude, he's got big knockout power.
Yeah.
So use it. And I'm glad we finally got to see that. Modestas Spakauskas as well. Sorry, I'm kind of just chopping them all down here, but that was.
I've got so many funny stories off the back of so many things that you're talking about, but you're rattling.
I'll throw it back to you in a second. But the only reason I wanted to mention him was not just because he had an incredible performance, and what a fight that was, might I just say, but also he does work with the Against the Fence guys, of course, who we had JK on here before, and they were out working with him on the same day. And I saw you actually met with at least one of them, or a couple of them. I saw on your pop-up shop thing, which we'll get into in a little bit, but I saw you had a little chat with a couple of them. So yeah, credit to Modi as well. So yeah, I'll throw it back to you there. Some good fights, but just blitz through them. Yeah,
it was some good performances. Sam Patterson had a very solid performance, good takedown, good submission. I knew once he hit the ground, it was probably going to be lights over. It was just a fact of getting it there. He'd done exactly that, very professional. And once it hits the ground, he's just very meticulous, and he's very, very cerebral when it gets to the jiu-jitsu game. Always very well balanced, and I often give him the advantage there. So it was good to see him pick up another win and pick up some momentum, because he had a tough time when he went on his debut in London. Yeah. Of course, we had Nathaniel Wood, looked impressive as always. His striking was very, very sharp. And I was talking to him in the build-up to this week, and I was just saying, mate, I hadn't seen him in a little while, and he's really grown into his body. He's got a man body for the first time ever, and that
father time
lack of restriction from bantamweight, he's really been allowed to develop. And I didn't realise how much he was being held back physically from that weight cut. Of course, I knew there was impact to it, the cut and the mindset and the training, all of that, but I didn't quite realise how big his body wanted to get. So he was looking really, really strong, actually, in the fight week build-up. The reason why I wanted to drag it back to was actually the Giga fight, because I don't know if you saw this, but Giga Chikadze came out and was accusing Arnold Allen of spying on his camp.
I don't understand.
Did you see this?
It does happen. Yeah, I saw
let me explain. Let me explain, because this is funny. So, essentially what that was, I was listening to Arnold Allen's interview in a post-fight press conference, and basically what that was is he had some training partners in the same room or something along those lines, and then Giga asked them to leave, and they left. That was pretty much it from there. And then towards the back end of the conversation, I just heard him say, and Nathaniel Wood's team too. And I was thinking, what? What's he talking about? And then the penny sort of dropped, finally. And there may have been another instance, but if I were to guess, it would be the following instance is what he's referring to. Me and Brad Pickett have gone for a sauna. And we're literally sitting in the sauna just having a chat. Nothing more than that, right? And in the sauna at the time was Giga Chikadze and Benil Dariush. And me and Brad are just chatting. And then me, Brad, are just chatting to Benil, just having very general conversation. Nothing crazy. Same conversation we've had with a million other people that week. What are you doing for the time zones? What time zone you on? Very standard stuff. Giga Chikadze is also sitting there doing his weight cut. Now, I believe he is actually referring to me and Brad Pickett as the potential spies. So it has been a very random week, topped off by the fact that I am now an international spy for Arnold Allen. But if it was going to be for anyone, why not Arnie? So all the homies love Arnold
Funny story
Allen.
about him, actually. Again, I can sort of tie myself into Arnold Allen's fight week build-up. Strangely, this is very, very long-winded. But basically, I saw on Twitter, this is the most random tangent, but I was on Twitter and I saw a video. Do you ever get, those videos of like nonces getting captured or like caught on video? I know you're wondering, how the hell do I get to Arnold Allen from here? But basically, there's a video of one.
Tough time.
Of this guy who, I swear to God, he looked to a T like Arnold Allen, right? And I thought it was funny. I tagged him in it and I said, what happened to the title charge? And I didn't think anything of it.
He would have loved that. He would have loved that.
But and then I saw someone else tagged him as well afterwards. And then I didn't think anything of it. And then a few days later, I saw him do an interview with Nina Drama. And she was interviewing a bunch of fighters and they were doing fighter lookalikes. And then she was like, "Oh, who do you look like the most?" And all these fights. And then it got around to Arnold Allen's one, and he was like, "Oh yeah, people have been saying I look like this paedophile," and I just couldn't stop laughing. So I don't know if he did see my tweet, but I think he might have done, and I thought it was hilarious. Because honestly, I'll have to send it to you after. The spitting image. I'm not even joking. It's quite uncanny how much he looks like him. But
I actually
going
wasn't
back to the fight. Incredible performance.
Didn't see her that often throughout the fight week, but I managed to have a good conversation with her just before we left, actually, in our hotel lobby. It was quite funny hearing her perception of Manchester, to be honest, because it's a weird place. It's the first time I've ever been to Manchester as well, and it's just scatty. It is very scatty. She used the word sloppy, which I thought was funny because it is that. There are a lot of drunk people
It looks a lot like Nottingham,
very often.
So I'm assuming it's similar.
It was quite intense. And talking about intense, we're jumping all over the place here, but another thing that happened is I get back. It was actually just after I'd been chatting with Nina, funnily enough, just after this very conversation that I was referring to. I'm in the lobby and I'm waiting for the breakfast buffet to open. And I look to my left and there's a little tension arising, let's say. There's not really many people in the hotel lobby at this point. It's about 7 a.m, just after the fights, and there isn't really many people around. I'm just chatting to Jake, which is Volk's videographer. Obviously, I've met him quite a few times now, spent a little bit of time with him, obviously in Thailand, and around this fight week as well. So I was just chatting to him, we're having a little conversation. Volk's to my right, I think, chatting to someone else, but there's not a lot of people there. I look to my left, and it's Michael Venom Page and Farid Bhashrat, one of the Bhashrat brothers.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I just see MVP give him a little dig to the face, and things have completely erupted. Things have completely just gone crazy.
Oh, so this is what Volk was talking about.
No, this is not what Volk's talking about. This is what I spoke about on my page, right? And then
I saw Volk talk about it on his thing, and then everyone's wondering who is this about.
So I spoke about it. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to chat about this because I know no one else is going to, because there was no one there. So no one else could have spoke about it because there wasn't really anyone there. So I actually had a little video of it. It was just outside, like a little scuffle and whatnot. So I just took a screenshot and just thought, okay, cool, I'll talk about it just for a little bit of fun. And then I saw Volk's done a video on it.
Yeah, it's all over.
It's all over the place, right? And what I was actually glad of is that it lined completely up to what I said. So I'm glad that I didn't remember the details very wrong. But what had actually happened is he hadn't used the name. So I was just joking with Jake, his videographer, and said, I didn't care about the name, so I just let it rip. And he was like, it's a little bit different. He went, yeah, Volks obviously didn't really want to because he's a fighter and whatnot. And I said to him, I was just messing about. I said, what, you mean me and Volk don't hold the same weight in this industry? Ouch. He actually thought I was being serious, which I thought was even funnier, to be perfectly honest. However, long story short, there is actually a video to this from someone that took the video outside of the hotel through the glass, and he is the only person, and he is currently holding it ransom because he said, I don't want to post it, I don't want to get anyone in trouble. So before we jumped on this call, I was about to get sent this video, hopefully. So when we hang up, hopefully I will have this video and I will be the only person. But the reason it was crazy is because he's trying to bypass all these, because there was security there. He's trying to get past all the security to get to MVP. And Vulture's standing next to me, and he's trying to calm it down. Next thing I know, he's trying to double leg Farid Bhashrat to sort of chill him out. He gets juked.
Whoa.
Yeah. He gets juked and he sort of slips past him. But the thing that was crazy is it was just under the stairs. So I was a bit worried that he was just going to smack his head on these stairs. But anyway, he shakes him off, gets past him, but there were just too many people in the end. So it never really amounted to anything after that. But that was just the flipping icing on the cake to a weird weekend.
Talk about gossip, bloody hell.
No,
exclusives.
Honestly, it was I told you it was weird. It was very, very weird. There were a lot of things that happened, and there are actually a lot of things that I can't even tell you on camera that actually happened that would make it even stranger. To be perfect, I'll tell you
I'm invested.
off record. But yeah, any questions you got for me throughout the week? Because there's a lot of things that I've missed out. Feel free to chuck my way, and we'll get into them.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you. I mentioned it earlier about the pop-up shop you did. I'll let you explain that, because I think you can naturally do a much better job than I can. But it did, from what I saw, from what you posted and your videos on Instagram, it looked like a overwhelming success.
Yeah, it was good. So for anyone that doesn't know, I decided to run a pop-up in Manchester. I wanted to give away some jerseys, some caps, some casuals comics, and just meet a bunch of people within the community and put some faces to some Instagram handles. So this is exactly what I did. So rented a studio, set it all up, and also invited some guest speakers. So we had the strength and conditioning coach of Mick Parkin, Chris Duncan, a few of the boys. So he came down and had a little chat with me. I've known him for a little while now. We've spoke online a lot. So we ran sort of a Q&A, if you like. So invited a bunch of people down. Obviously, you always have that nervous, is anyone actually going to rock up? That was my first thought. But fortunately, we did. And I think in the end, there was probably about 20 people there, which was a good number, right? Because it was quite intimate. It was good to meet these people. And then I could give away a bunch of things as well. Gave away some jerseys, hats, comics, like I just mentioned. And it was actually really, really successful. We've got a bunch of content that I'll be posting throughout this week and next week that we'll get into. But that was really fun. We did that on the Thursday. And one of the people that actually rocked up is called Tukos, who actually is in the UFC now.
Oh.
And I knew him mutually because he used to live in London, used to train with Ash and Brad and whatnot. Ash was actually his first ever coach, gave him his first ever lesson. And of course, he's from London, so there was just a mutual connection with that anyway. So finally met him this fight week, got along very well. And he actually came to the pop-up with Kaz Crossley. And after I saw him on that day, I saw him in the training room, in the hotel room, me, Ash and Brad and him. And that's what I'll tell you off record, that particular story. And he comes up to me and said, "Oh, love the comics. It's sick. I think what you should do is you should do them with some of the boys at the gym." So for context, he's at Killcliff MMA. But what's actually more than that is he is quite honestly one of the most connected people in this sport. He corners absolutely everyone around the world, and I feel like he knows everyone around the world. And he came up to me.
You do as well.
Yeah, it feels like it at the moment, honestly. And he came up to me and said, "What you should do is you should do some one-on-one exclusive ones with some of the fighters, some of the boys from the gym, because they'll love it. They'll think this is sick. And then you can just try and do somewhat of like a profit split or something." I was like, "Oh, cool. That's really good. That's a good idea." So I said, "Who are you thinking?" And he threw out some names, and he said some people that I think would be good would be Gilbert Burns, Michael Chandler, Kamaru Usman, and Bilal Muhammad. He's very close with Bilal Muhammad as well, and he was sort of like semi in his corner for this fight. He was with him at fight week and in the training rooms and whatnot as well. So hopefully what I'll be doing quite soon is flying out there. Maybe Gilbert Burns or Kamaru Usman's are ones that I quite want to start with, or maybe even Bilal Muhammad. And I'll be doing... Yeah, starting small. Yeah, exactly. Start on a smaller scale with the new champ.
Only the second greatest world of all time. You know,
yeah. I think Kamaru Usman will be a really good one because he's got a really good story, and also I think I'll get along with him pretty well. So that was one little escalation from that. But the fight week in general was good. I got to meet a lot of people that I'd either followed or they'd followed me within the sport in regards to the fans. I had a couple of weird interactions, to be honest. I was queuing up to get on the tram to the actual
That's your
press
first mistake,
conference. Yeah, I never wanted to get on
never
the tram.
take a UK city tram. It is just full of decrepit individuals. Asking for trouble.
I'd never been on one, to be honest. I didn't know they existed, really, in the UK at least.
They are quite useful, to be fair.
One kid come up to me, completely random. This is the first time I've ever had this interaction. I've had people come up to me and say, "Oh, you Casuals Corner," and say, "Oh, watch your videos." I've had that. I've never had someone come up to me. He came up to me with his phone in his hand of my video and said, "Oh, are you Casuals Corner?" He said, "You broke down one of my recent fights that I just had." And I was like, that's weird. I've never had that one before. And he showed me one of his fights that he just had that I broke down on one of his most recent events, which was a bit bizarre. But it was strange as well, mate. A couple of people even asked me, I was at Cage Warriors, and a couple of people came up to me and asked me for photos. I was like, do they think I'm someone else, or do they actually just watch my videos? I'm not too sure what the dynamic is, but I was like, yeah, mate, all right, sure.
It's part of the game, though, isn't it? You said it yourself.
It was weird.
You relentlessly post yourself in any capacity. You're gonna see. That's the sort of what's the phrase I'm looking for? I wouldn't say
logical progression.
Yeah, logical progression of that, of course. So. I mean, I know you probably don't take it as any surprise, but I'm also equally, I'm not surprised you find it quite strange, because I probably would too.
It was a bit weird. Get my
it's a sign of your work paying off, is it not?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And of course, it's actually just nice to see people that constantly engage with my stuff and come up to me in real life. That was pretty cool, because I had noticed the handles. That's the thing. I noticed the usernames. But so it was cool to meet some of the people. I had a really good conversation with. This is strange, right? We're sitting at dinner. It was after the weigh-in, so we all went out with Nathaniel and the rest of the team and a few of his friends and sponsors and things like that. Usually do it after the weigh-ins, right? As a bit of a sort of send-off to the fight, if you like. So we're sitting around the table, and long story short, me and Brad end up talking about Eric Nixick, because Brad watched one of the videos I did about him doing some training with Tom, and he was asking me some questions about him, because he said he doesn't know him that well and was just asking some questions. And then we're in the fighter hotel an hour or so later, and I'm just sitting chatting with Brad. And that's the thing about being around that fight week, is whenever I'm with Brad, of course, he's just absolutely beloved within the space. So everyone comes up to him within the sport. He gets a lot of fans that come up to him and go, "Oh, Brad Pickett, legend," and things like that. But it's more than that. It's more so the fighters and the people within the game come up to him, whether it's the Bruce Buffers, whether it's the flipping Dana Whites, whoever it is, always come up to him because they love Brad Pickett.
Yeah, he has that reputation.
Yeah, he really does. And he's
Dana's favourite fighter.
He's your favourite fighter's favourite fighter. So people always come up to him. And we're just standing there chatting, and Joseph Benavidez and Eric Nixick, funnily enough, come over. And Brad and Joseph Benavidez are just catching up, and they're having a good conversation. I actually thought it was going to be a little bit of a high and buy job, like, how you getting on, how you doing? But it was a little bit more detailed. Long story short, I'm looking at Eric Nixick sort of across the line of this conversation. I'm thinking, I've had a few things that I've really wanted to speak to him about, just about coaching, about breaking down fights, and a few things that I've learned and picked up off of him. And I couldn't really find the opportunity in the conversation, because there wasn't a lull. So when there was finally a lull, I went over to him and I reintroduced myself, because I'd already said hello, but reintroduced myself and said, "Oh, I had a couple of things that when I saw you, I said to myself, I really wanted to speak about." And anyway, long story short, I get into this super heated, like, passionate conversation with Eric Nixick about breaking down fights and things that I've learned off of him, because I have learned a lot from him. And yeah, we had a chat about 20 minutes, and I really got an insight into his approach to the game, of how he looks at fights, how he breaks them down, how he finds patterns, how he finds successes, and why he's like that. And there was this sort of penny drop moment of when he goes, "I'm a boy who grew up in Vegas." And it just sort of clicked. And I was like, of course, this was never an angle of what I thought of. He's a coach that plays with probabilities. He plays with the percentages. And I said, it's making so much sense now. It's essentially flipping the money ball of MMA. And he was like, exactly. He said, when we're on the ground and I'm talking about submissions, I'm not talking about going for arm bars, I'm talking about going for percentages. I'm saying let go of that because that's a low flipping percentage move. And it was just fascinating to pick the brain of him. So
and
that was really, really
that's
interesting.
a phrase that's used quite a lot in terms of grappling. You talk about high percentage submissions, but I feel like, you know, people don't actually take that term as literally as the words are. Do you know what I mean? So that's actually quite an interesting outlook. And I guess that encompasses not just grappling in terms of what he's describing, but the whole fight game as well.
Honestly, I won't bore you with the details, but it was a very, on my behalf, very interesting conversation. Really, really, really interesting conversation. And I was glad to get that opportunity to meet him. And of course, I will be going to Vegas in a week or so. So hopefully I'll be able to go out there as well. And maybe we'll have a chat on camera and maybe do an interview as well, because that'd be really, really cool. So, yeah, mate, it's been...
that's probably the craziest shit I've ever heard you say.
Intense.
Seems like you talk to just about everyone, quite literally every single person I could think of. It sounds like you've had a little chat with.
Honestly, I was with Paul. So he works for a production company, really, really good production company. And I gave him some money to basically come along and film some stuff for me and edit some stuff for me. And we get along very well anyway. I knew him very well before that. And that's what we did all week. All week we did that. I put a lot of value onto having meaningful interactions with people. I tell you one of the weirdest ones that actually happened. It wasn't that strange of a story, but it was a little bit of a out-of-body moment. So, of course, at this point, I've, in Thailand, met up with Volk, done a little bit of work with him and whatnot, but we're in the fighters' lobby, and I'm just chatting to someone, Mike Owens. Do you know who that is? Does the interviews.
Yeah. I follow him.
Really good at what he's doing. Yeah, exactly. And I'm chatting to him. I know him fairly well, and we've been at some events together, so we're just having a good conversation. And then this was at the start of the week, so Volk's rocked up to the Fighters Hotel for the first time. And as he's sort of walking past, the lobby's packed, by the way, and he is loved. Everyone wants a piece of Volk. Literally everyone. And as he's walking past, I sort of turn to my left and catch eyes with him, and he sort of comes up and he's like, "Oh, what's happening? Will you right?" And I was thinking, this is weird. I was like, this is weird. There's literally hundreds of people outside queuing up to flip and try and get a photo with him, and he's like, was said hello to each other in the lobby. I was like, yeah, this is a very, very strange game.
Not gonna pretend I'm not jealous about that one. I can't lie.
One bit that I missed, and obviously I'm not doing this all for name dropping purposes. It's just because flipping fun to happen, mate. Yeah, fun to get into it. But one person I was really, really happy that I could finally meet person to person. We followed each other. Well, I followed him for ages and he's followed me for quite a while now, actually, to be honest. We've spoke quite a few times online in the DMs. Never met in person. Michael Bisping. Never met in person. Michael Bisping.
See, I had that one over you.
Finally.
Not anymore.
I finally got to have a conversation with him, a proper conversation. We ended up being in the same lift together and we were just chatting, and I was saying to him, I made the comic for him, obviously. He was the main feature and whatnot.
Did you give it to him?
Well, this was the thing, right? I didn't have it on me then. And then the next day, we were in the bar together. We were at the bar together because I was just with Nath and he was chatting to Nath. And he said, "Oh, do you guys know each other?" And Nath was like, "Yeah, we've known each other for a while and Will does my social media." And Bisping didn't actually realise that at the time. He was like, "Oh," he actually gave me some really nice some compliments, to be honest. He was like, "Oh, you're doing a really good job, mate. Like, keep smashing it. I see the hard work you put in," which was cool. But we had a little chat at the bar for like a little 5-10 minutes, just about different things. It wasn't one of those. As soon as I spoke to him, I was like, this is exactly why I wanted to meet him in person, because I knew it was someone that I wanted to actually speak to. Not online, not through DMs. It was someone I wanted to look in the one eye and have a good chat with, because I knew I'd get along with him very, very well. And long story short, didn't end up getting the comic to him, but not a problem, because I actually think it's teeing it up for a better meeting in the future, if you like. And he said, we're sitting at a bar, and he goes to me, I can't remember what he said, but he goes, keep it casual. And I looked at him and I went, Mike, you do not realise how, I said, you do not know how much I want to just make that a little soundbite and capture that. But I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be one of those dickheads that whips out the camera and tries to film everything. Because I have this weird thing, right, where the first time I meet people, or at least the first couple of times of meaningful interactions, I don't just want to meet them by shoving a camera in their face and trying to...
Many people would want to do that.
Well, you say that, but yeah, they do, because everyone just walks up to these people with their cameras out and say, can I get a selfie? Can I get a photo? Can I do this? Can I do that? So I said to him, I was like, I'm not going to ask you to do it, but every fibre of my being wants you to say this on camera for me. And he laughed. He was like, yeah, you can do it if you want, mate. And he was like, no, you know what we'll do? We'll do some work together. We'll make some content together at another time and we'll do that. And I was like, yeah, 100%. Let's do that. We'll set up in the future. So I'm really,
isn't he? He's as well. He's much bigger in real life.
Yeah, he's a unit.
He's massive.
Yeah, he's a unit. He's a middleweight though. He is a middleweight, let's not forget.
Well, he was a light... Well, yeah, he was a light heavyweight, I mean, initially.
I think he weighed light heavyweight. I don't think he was a light heavyweight.
Yeah.
Even though he competed there, he wasn't a light heavyweight. But lightweights are big people. I stand next to Paddy. He's the same height as me, near enough, you know? And he's a lightweight. And I'm 6'2", with a little Air Force.
Yeah, you're pretty tall to be fair.
Yeah, with an Air Force on. I'm probably even a little bit taller than that. I stand next to Paddy and I think, flipping hell, he's a big boy. So middleweights are always going to be units. I'd say Mike was probably about the same height as me, but he's wide, right? He's quite
mate, his hands.
Yeah, he's got big hands.
They're huge.
Yeah, he's got big hands.
Lovely guy though. I only wish I got more time with him when I got to briefly chat with him.
Really nice man, but didn't want to overload him and didn't want to sort of overstep my mark. So yeah, we had a good couple of conversations, and I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm going to do some work with him. I've got it flipping posted on my wall at home on a Post-it note from a couple of years ago. It just says work with MB. So that's in the pipeline. And it's probably quite a good place to round this off, to be honest.
Yeah.
Unless you want to particularly touch upon anything or speak about anything.
I almost feel just a bit shit because I've got fuck all in comparison. Then again, I could never top that. No, for me, it's been pretty standard procedure. Obviously, shame about the end result of Leon Edwards and stuff like that. But yeah, business as usual for me. Working hard on, again, both channels, just upping the workload. It's, new challenges for me. But yeah, I think that's been a good place to wrap it up, as you said. So this has been the MMA Creators Podcast, episode number 61. A whirlwind of a week, and yeah, we'll see you pretty soon. Cheers.